world we live. Worldwide fans of Mechwarrior.
There, he's online. Let me put him at the top.
Hey, Anders, I want to hear your beautiful voice.
Hey, Anders, are you having sound troubles? Oh, let's see if he typed in the... Nope.
Did you make sure he was on push to talk and all that?
Yeah, let me check.
Oh, it is push to talk. I forgot.
Oh, there you go. Yep, I can hear you, although you're a little quiet. Is he a little quiet for everybody?
Yeah, he's really quiet for me. Are you able to up your volume somehow, Anders?
Yes, looking at the microphone settings right now. How's this?
Much better.
Yeah, that's good. All right, we should probably get this thing fired up.
Alrighty. Let's open up the channel. And boom. There's all the questions. So,
Look at that.
Okay, quick now, answer them all.
so Anders, I'm just gonna run Anders through real quick because he it's his first AMA.
Make
If
sure
you
you
see the...
introduce who's Anders. Let everyone know who Anders is too.
Yeah, that's right. Everyone, Anders is a programmer.
Hello, everyone.
And Anders, if you want to jump on the text channel called 10 a.m. AMA session, do you see that one?
Yes, I'm in it.
Right, perfect. Okay, so you can start from the very top, and then what we'll do is we'll go down from first and forward, and then we'll just check them off once they get answered. But yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, Tina.
Mm-hmm.
Very cool.
Okay.
Should I read the question out?
Yeah, we should try to. Maybe not. You know, you could summarize it a little bit instead of reading everything word for word. That'll take a bit long, but yeah. Do you want to? I mean, the first one right there, I feel like I know the answer to, which means you probably do. So let's jump.
Okay, so the first question is regarding AI difficulty, and basically how will we see the AI become more threatening over the course of the campaign? There are going to be a few different ways for this. In terms of the skill of an individual unit, yes, over the course of a campaign, they will become better. Units will become more accurate. They'll manage their heat more efficiently, as opposed to enemies you meet at the beginning of the game where they're probably going to miss you much more often. They might overheat more frequently. And just in terms of the units you're going to face as well, where a lot of earlier enemies are going to be weaker fodder type units, whereas later on in the game you're going to be running into far more mechs as well as way more of these tanks and helicopters and whatever else is there.
So it is based on mechs and equipment, and as you say, like better units, better mechs, things like that. But it's not limited to that, as the question was alluding to. It's not just about making sure you face higher tonnage mechs or something, that there is a set of skills. Is there 4 or 5 main skills? I forget the exact number. We don't have to get into the specifics. Some of those specifics could change still, but yes, there's a handful of parameters that directly relate to your pilots as well, right, Anders?
Yes, there are, and they affect a whole host of things. Accuracy, what we're calling lethality, which is how likely an enemy is to target a critically exposed component versus, say, maybe a newer pilot would not understand that, this component is exposed and I should finish blowing it off. Maybe they'll spread their fire around. Whereas a more experienced enemy is going to say, hey, I see your left torso is exposed. I'm going to blow that off because I know, you have a powerful weapon in your left arm as well, and I can just really limit you and really damage you.
Right. So that kind of answers the second question there as well. Just that, yeah, your employed pilots really share the same level, the same type of piloting skills. And we've mentioned this, I think, in the past, but the enemies you face will have certain skill settings, but your pilots, of course, will have certain skill settings when you hire them, but they will get better as you use them. And this is a little bit different than, say, BattleTech, which more RPG style, you go in and spend the experience. Being a real-time action game, things happen in real time. So when you, as they're shooting in the mission, they're getting better. And when you come back from mission, you'll see a summary of like, oh, they got a little better in piloting, a little better in this and that, and you'll see the difference and changes from the experience they got on that mission. They'll just get better in real time. But is that accurate, Anders? Is there anything you want to add to
that? You won't necessarily see them getting better in real time, but yes, at the end of a mission, everything they've done in that mission gives them some progression towards their set of skills. So if they use their lasers a lot throughout the mission, they're going to be much better at using their lasers. If they were dodging shots all mission, their evasion rating might go up and making it even easier for them to continue to dodge. Whatever stats are in there, something thematically appropriate is happening during normal gameplay and will essentially rank up all those stats.
So it's a calculation that happens at mission conclusion, kind of like reward, salvage,
correct.
everything. Okay, awesome. Let's move along here.
Okay, so the next one is about pathfinding. So the AI in terms of pathfinding, it tries to figure out where it should be in relation to all of the other units in the world. So for instance, in a firefight, and say there are 8 mechs involved, your lance of 4 and maybe an enemy lance of 4, each individual AI unit is trying to find where's the best position for me to engage my target, to try to avoid enemies as much as possible, relative to their preferred combat engagement tactic. So, for instance, an Atlas is probably going to want to close the distance and brawl based on its loadout, based on it being an assault mech having massive armor. It's going to say, okay, well, I need to follow my leader, but I also want to get up close and personal and blast people. So in terms of its pathfinding, what we end up doing is saying, okay, because you're following someone, try to stay in this sort of radius around your leader. But there's no hard limit on you must be exactly at this point in relation to that leader while combat's ongoing. So the AI will then say, is there a better position for me than where I am now? Can I maybe flank this opponent? Can I move somewhere to get a better line of fire? Maybe somewhere up a hill, for instance, where I have a better angle and they have a worse angle. All of that is completely possible. In terms of if it will smash through a building, internally, our units sort of know what they can and can't go through, and they also know whether what they're going through is important to them. Meaning, like, is it on my side? So, for instance, if you're attacking a fortified enemy base, enemy units know that, hey, these walls are defending our base. Let's try not to run through them. And maybe you're not even able to run through them based on how big or thick they are. Allied mechs, on the other hand, like you, the player, and your lance, they might say, I don't care about these walls at all because they're the bad guys. So they'll try to shoot through them if possible. They'll try to run through them if possible, if it makes sense to do so. If there's a door right beside them, they're going to probably try to use the door. The AI also, we've set it up currently so that nothing deliberately tries to ram the player or other units. With mechs, when they get really clustered up, it results in really awkward moments of gameplay where it just doesn't feel enjoyable. So the AI tries to make it so that collisions are relatively rare. They're not impossible, but they definitely try to say, stay away from me, give me some space so that the flow of the movement, the flow of the fight doesn't get disrupted.
Yeah, nothing worse than like a bunch of mechs kind of like piled up, within arm's reach of each other, like trying to get free. So those are some of the challenges we face with a big first person, shooter style action game compared to like a turn-based game that's like Battletech that's able to say, you're going here and play this animation. And so I think the question is related more to like people have asked when we talked about art and the mechs and stuff. There was certainly a lot of questions around falling down and knockdowns and things like that. So no, at this point the AI is not, for those reasons that Anders listed, not looking to ram you and knock you down. I think those things kind of remain on the table, but they just don't. They're not like a top priority item. A top priority item is to make sure the combat just feels great, and that's what we've been focusing on to date. Will we get to adjust how aggressive or passive our lance mates, I almost said line mates, like hockey or something, your lance mates can be in combat? I think I'm going to answer this, and then Anders can correct me, but so your lance mates, your pilots, have their own personalities set by their pilot skill ratings, and they have a a voice and a picture and a persona, and they perform like those skill ratings, and they do what you tell them to do. So if you tell them to attack a target or to follow you or to go here and do there, they're gonna do what you ask them to do. I'm not sure if there's anything. I mean, there's still maybe a little bit of personal flair when it comes to like if they're prone to like evading a lot or using long range weapons and things like that. Is that how you'd answer that, Anders? Like, there's not necessarily like you're not going to tell them to attack something, or I guess the question's more accurately, like you're changing their stance from like passive or aggressive mode. Like, I don't really think that's the case. It's more along the lines of here's their skills and here's what they're commanded to do currently.
Yes. We have a pseudo aggressive or passive behavior in terms of the current order that your lance mate is following. So if you say, go attack this target, your lance mate is going to go and fight and be as aggressive as they want to be, to go just take this guy out based on their loadout, based on what makes sense for how they would fight. A catapult being aggressive in that way is probably still going to hang back at 400, 500, 600 meters and shoot LRMs, whereas an Atlas or some sort of brawling mech is going to run up and try to get right up in your face. And I think I touched on this a bit earlier, but if you had your lance mates, your mechs following you, they're going to be more passive in how they're engaging, in terms of they're going to try to stay relatively close to you, within a few hundred meters. If you're running away, like, they're not going to go gung-ho and fight the enemy to the death. They're going to say, hey, we need to be following our leader, and they're going to be coming with you. And then, yes, as Russ said, they will be more or less aggressive, more or less, I guess overconfident is probably a good word for it, in terms of heat management, in terms of weapon usage, based on their pilot persona.
Cool. I'm going to just comment quickly on Force's question here. He's asking about this Apex Legends ping system. And all I'm going to say about that for now is I've heard lots about it. I heard it's amazing. I haven't checked it out yet. I don't think we've had proper time to sort of like analyze it and check it out and comment. But I think also we're probably not going to get caught too much trying to chase what other games are doing, is we're just trying to get our game finished. But it sounds like it's amazing. And I like the descriptions that Force has given here about contextual type commands. But yeah, I don't think I haven't seen it enough to comment on it at this point. It sounds pretty rad though. Everyone's been going on about it.
Yeah, as far as I know, we do not currently have a plan for this ping system. We're sticking to the orders that you're able to give to your allies. Attack, follow me, go to location, hold your fire, etc. It could very well be something that's awesome that we want to add in, but as far as I know, there aren't any plans for it.
Will the AI have any sort of morale, or is that moral? Yeah, moral system. I guess sort of like making judgments about what they should be shooting and killing. I would say that the player is the moral character here. Your pilots work for you. I don't think you're going to see a situation where you tell your pilots to destroy someone, and they say, no, I can't do that. It's against my beliefs or anything like that. So no, the player's making the moral decisions. I think his pilots are doing what the player wants them to do.
Mm-hmm.
Unless we're talking about story elements and things, you'll see aspects of that, of course, in the story missions and stuff like that. But not so much just like emergent moral behaviors, unless you disagree with me.
No. I don't think there are any moral systems involved. In case you mean a morale system, we do have plans for mechs to flee based on battle conditions, depending on the type of mech, depending on how the battle is going. For instance, if your lance has been fighting an enemy lance and you've obliterated all of them except for the one remaining light mech, a Raven or a Commando or something, it's probably going to be, oh no, I can't fight these guys, and turn tail and run. Whether it's running because it's really scared or whether it's running because it wants to lure you into an ambush, that's for you to find out.
Cool. I think with Griffin's question, I think we just answered that on the aggressive and defensive stance stuff.
Yes, I'd say we've answered that.
Will the AI vehicles focus fire on the player threats? Here's how I understand it, and Anders can add to it, is, well, there's an aggro system, right? And so the players aggro the AI, and I think there's situations where certainly if you're a faster moving mech and maybe get into the middle of a handful of vehicles and you've aggroed them, they're going to all be focusing fire on you. I think it's up to you as a commander to maybe whether you want to focus fire or whether you want to spread your lance mates out onto various enemy targets and essentially pull aggro so that you can be dividing their attention. But it really comes down to like who is demanding the AI's attention. So there could be moments where you're being focus fired on, or you're forcing them to divide their attention.
Yes, and just to expand on that, this is also something that's going to depend a lot on the difficulty that you're playing on, how hard the mission is. It's also something where it really depends on how many units you have with you, how many of your lancemates you brought, and how many enemies there are in a given mission. If you're trying to run a mission solo and there are 20 enemies, they're all going to be shooting at you, right? And you're going to have to deal with that. Whereas if you have, your full lance with you, maybe you'll have, 8 guys shooting at you and the other 12 will divide up amongst your allies. But that's going to depend on what the units are, what the difficulty is, and like Russ said, how you're engaging them. If you're running in by yourself, the enemies might not even see your lance mates yet, so they're all going to pummel you. Which leads itself to, if you have a tanky mech with you, some big assault with a ton of armor, maybe you send him in first to start soaking up a lot of damage while the rest of your lance runs around to get better firing lanes.
Yeah, I mean, just a quick side note of, as I was playing sorry, I keep typing with my press to talk. That even though we're not like some, squad-based tactics game, there are quite a bit of tactics you can do even with your simple command for your lance mates, like Anders said, like sending an enemy in, or sorry, sending an assault in first, quickly spreading your lance mates out to take on individual mechs that you think suit their brawling capabilities the best. I did a lot of these things during the MechCon mission, and I found them to be useful and actually, I don't know, it was fun. Added a layer. There is a bit of a layer there. I mean, you can probably play it as simply as you want. You can probably just run in and just make sure they are always focusing on your target. But there's other things you can do too that seems to be very effective to maybe minimize damage from one particular mech taking too much damage in a brawl. Anyhow, so I think there's a lot there. Army of One, is the AI moddable? What sorts of variables does it keep track of? Does the AI have perfect information? I'm going to answer this just very simply, and then we're going to leave it for, I think, a modding AMA. I mean, I think the answer is yes, it's moddable, and I think it would quite be like very significantly moddable. But I'm sorry, Army, let's leave that for a modding AMA. So I don't want to say anything incorrect, nor do I want to kind of steal from that moment when we have that AMA.
Bypassing the moddable part, then, the AI does not have perfect information. It is limited based on the sensors on the individual unit. So, for instance, in bad weather, it might say, I can only see 200 or 300 meters, whereas on a normal perfect day, maybe it can see 500, 600, 700, 800 meters. And it will respect that range. So if you can't see the enemy probably can't see you either. Yes.
Cool. Will the lance behave differently depending on the loadout? Yeah, I think we've answered that. Quick answer is yes. You got your catapult, either whether you're fighting it or you're telling it to fight someone else. This isn't one of the. We'll kind of work through these through the AMA. There have been a number of new and also improved AI behaviors that we've put into the game since the MechCon mission. This is one of them, one where they really respect their loadout. They stay at range based on the weapon loadout, try to keep that range as you close distance, and they're generally much more effective about using the loadout that they have. Will AI work independently, or are we expect them to work together?
So
yes and no. Yeah, go ahead. And
okay, sorry. Yeah, like the AI will work independently and together situationally. So in the example you're giving, if the player squad engages on one mech in a city or a base or whatever, wherever you are, if there are enemies nearby, they will hear the fight going on. Essentially, the guy you've engaged on is going to be screaming, "Hey, come help me! Come help me!" And nearby units are going to hear that and come towards the fight. They're going to say, "Okay, we're not just going to let our buddy get blown up. We're going to come and try to help." Um, in terms of if they're going to flank or if they're going to bottleneck, it's really going to depend on the layout of the base. It's going to depend on just where they are in their patrol route, or if they're idle in a garrison and they're just like, "Hey, we need to get here as fast as possible." So you're going to see different situations play out depending on essentially random chance based on where the AI is in its behaviors.
Ghastly. Oh, I gotta stop doing that. No, I would say they won't. They will be different and better depending who you're fighting, and that's all set up in our encounter system. Certainly, pirates on the periphery will not be as skilled as First Sword of Light, as your example goes. And I'd take it a step further and say we do have like we're working on a story mission, and we do have this capability of also putting the mechs in um, worse condition or better condition. So we're still kind of waiting to see how much we're going to be able to use that in our system. But obviously, I think it's a pretty neat concept if you're fighting um, well taken care of mechs versus not so well taken care of mechs. How will the AI focus targets? Will they try to focus fire one target? I would say they do based on you commanding them to. They Otherwise, it's going to be based on a number of factors of the aggro system of how threatened they are by specific AI targets. But I think you as the commander is the one that's going to specifically tell your teammates to focus fire a target. Does
Yes,
that sound
that's
correct?
correct. And just to expand on to that, your lancemates tend to prioritize threats to themselves. So if your lance runs into an encounter and there's an enemy lance of mechs, there are tanks, there are VTOLs, and 6 of them are pummeling one guy, he's going to prefer dealing with the people who are shooting him, rather than necessarily the people who are fighting you. That being said, if the situation switches around, there's only say 3 enemies, he very well may focus fire one of these guys just because that guy's the biggest threat. No one's really attacking him, so he's free to say, who's causing the most harm to my allies? Let's go after this guy. Yeah.
Enter, please give some specific examples of difficulty options. Can these be adjusted on the fly during a mission or can only be done from the main menu? Now, I'm going to answer this cautiously because something could change as the game is finalized, but I want to encourage you to not really think of this necessarily as difficulty sliders or picking easy, medium, hard at the front main menu. I want you to mostly think of this as I'm playing the game and as my reputation increases and as I'm taking more and more elite missions, that the AI becomes a lot more difficult. I'm not sure yet at this point if this game will really have like a play the campaign on easy mode or play the campaign in hard mode. It's more of a play the campaign and you can kind of dictate the difficulty of the game by your selection of missions and how aggressive you want to be on increasing your reputation, taking difficulty missions, and more along those lines, I think. Will AI be able to armor? Sorry, did someone have a comment on that? Matt keeps chiming in. Shame on him. He probably is typing.
Yeah, no, I'm doing the same thing as you. I'm typing. I'm actually trying to get the screenshot.
Ooh, the screenshot. Will AI be able to armor roll and prioritize shooting with things like Centurion? I'm gonna let Anders answer this, but I think there is a bit of a concept of protecting damaged aspects, but maybe I'm just, wishful thinking here.
So, it's right now. We were playing around for a long time with having the enemy mechs torso twisting away from you, torso twisting to hide damaged sides, and sort of react more like a player that you would see in MWO, for instance, where they're trying to be as efficient with all of their armor points as possible. What we found is, in a lot of cases, it resulted in the AI doing really weird things, where they couldn't make an intelligent decision just based on the entire situation of the battle. So right now, what we've ended up doing is mostly taken it out. We've mostly said, just try to turn towards whatever you're shooting at. It will change based on how the mech is turning. It will change based on if they say, I'm tired of shooting at this guy. This other guy has been, blasting me for the last few seconds, and I really need to deal with him. It feels, for the most part, pretty similar to torso twisting and armor rolling, but it's not explicitly the same.
That's fair. That's a good answer. I mean, so we have spent time on it. We have thought a lot about it, and we are continuing to it's a consideration, and so I think everyone, that's what they want to hear. And I guess we haven't given up on it entirely through some improvements as we move along that it will either specifically do that or do enough things that have similar effect, I guess. So will enemies have a chain of command and react to changes in it, such as in Halo, killing elites would sometimes cause grunts to panic nearby? It's a little different. I would say, will enemies have a chain of command? You might want to maybe just spend a little more time. Maybe we already did talk enough about the aggro system, but I don't know. Do you feel like this one's been answered based on how things aggro and fight?
I think what he's more asking is, for instance, the Halo example with you kill the elite and then nearby grunts panic and run around for a while. We don't have a similar concept of, say you destroy the enemy Atlas and then all the nearby tanks, flee and run away for a while. It's a different situation where it doesn't really make sense for that to happen in terms of gameplay. We do have situations where, for instance, light mechs will say, hey, we're completely outgunned, let's run away, and maybe try to re-engage later if all of the heavier, mediums, heavies, assaults get destroyed. So I hope that answers your question.
Can we disable enemy AI instead of killing them outright? Well, number one, as you know, there's only a few ways to disable an enemy. I mean, in order to take out like an enemy mech, you either have to take out both its legs, destroy its CT, or destroy the cockpit in order to take it out of the fight. So in disabling it, you need to do one of those two things. So, or one of those, I guess, three different ways. So I think I think of the way I'll answer that is we have been discussing a little bit. There is still a bit of a discussion happening on where I think this question becomes more valid is if you destroy an enemy mech to the point where they're still alive, like meaning they still have their CT head and like a leg, but they're pogo stick, like they're down to, they have nothing, no weapons, no nothing. And now, of course, they just continue to sort of like fumble about until you finish them off. And I would like to do something there a little different. If I'm, trying to find time to say either have them eject or have them just power down and maybe put out the broadcast that they've surrendered or something other than just sort of like, limping around like a clown until you kill them. So I think hopefully that answers your question. I think sure, as a player, you could decide to always double leg them or something like that. It potentially could lead to better salvage if that's kind of the root of why you're asking the question. But of course, as you know, like it's very important for us to control the economy of this game and not let it be gamed. So that'll come down to your negotiation points and how much salvage rights you have. And no matter how much salvage is in the list, you're only going to be able to pick so many, but potentially you could have higher quality choices there. So, some of that still needs play testing, balancing considerations, and other aspects like, will they be able to eventually surrender or eject if they're essentially weaponless or something, is something we're still sort of working on, I guess, the best way to put it. Will AIMX get upgraded weapons, or is it all stock for them? At the moment, it's stock, but I believe there's no reason why we can't give. Actually, I'm not positive on this. Can we give? I think we can give specific loadouts. Certainly, in a story mission, I believe we have the capability of saying these mechs have these loadouts. But
yes, we
I'm not sure if
absolutely
the
can.
Okay, go ahead and take this one.
So depending on the mission, depending on the difficulty, depending on if it's, say, a boss unit, for instance, we can absolutely give the AI specific weapons or completely non-stock loadouts, depending on the situation we want to have happen. Most of the time, you're going to be running into stock loadouts, just because from a gameplay perspective, it lets you learn how to engage against that mech. You're going to know, okay, if I see a catapult, it's going to be using LRMs. I need to, if I blast off its side torsos, there goes most of its threat, ideally. Whereas, another mech may have, I'm trying to think of a good example, a really big ballistic weapon in its right arm. And it'll always have that really big ballistic in its right arm. So hey, that's its weak point. Blow that off, and now it can't really hurt me anymore.
Awesome. Will the AI take into account damage you do or allow the enemy to do to friendly buildings? Yeah, why don't you just talk a bit about the behavior? I think this is what they mean. Like, talk about we talked a bit about it before, but there is an enemy behavior now that understands if you're taking cover like behind a building, things like that.
Yes, that's correct. So in terms of damage done to friendly buildings, I'm assuming you're meaning not friendly to the player in this case, say the enemy taking into account damage the player does to other enemy buildings. Yes, the AI will take that into account, and it's factored into aggro. In terms of how the AI reacts in regards to having buildings nearby, what we've done is figured out whether the buildings are destructible or not, and the AI will say, okay, is my target behind something I know I can destroy? And if it is, it just blows up that building or that obstacle and tries to get to its target. If there's a wall in the way, or there are just too many things between the AI and its target, then it'll try to find a way around instead.
Wonderful. How complex will the commands be compared to Mechwarrior 4 if you're lance mates? I don't remember exactly what Mechwarrior 4 had, but I would say it's pretty much equivalent. It definitely was not a priority goal of ours to go more complex in that way or to become more of a tactical squad-based game or something like that. We're really focused on the mech action and making that as good as possible. So honestly, it was more of a driving force design goal to not be more complex in the commands. Just make the AI and the combat as smart as we possibly can while keeping the commands relatively simple.
Yes, that's exactly what we're aiming for.
How will the AI react to certain builds and tactic? Example, if you have LRM support units sitting in the back, will lights go after them or other smaller units? I think this is again like just around the aggro system, right, Anders? Like I could see a situation where I have my LRM boats in the back and I'm up front doing enough damage to hold aggro while my LRMs drop in on them. But if I'm not doing enough damage, and they may very well pull aggro back to the LRM boats, but there isn't necessarily like a behavior yet that says light mechs will ignore everything around them and run to the LRM boats, right? But I maybe suppose we could do that potentially, but that's how I see it behaving at the moment.
Yes, that's correct. Pretty much everything has to do with the aggro system. If, like you were saying, if you're doing enough damage and causing enough threat to stop people from going after your LRM mechs, that's what's going to happen. However, if you're just running in there and you're not shooting anyone, you're just being a body, and your LRM mechs are raining fire down on them from a distance, most of the enemies are probably going to start ignoring you actually and just run after those LRMs. So you have to be making sure that you're actively engaged in the fight if you're going to try to draw and hold aggro.
I'm not really sure how to answer Ghastly's thing because I feel like he says that your lance mates are more like Mechwarrior 4s and Battletechs where they're more like a sound set and a name, or are they more like Mech 3s where they comment on events and objectives and things? I'm going to go out on a limb here and say Mechwarrior 3s are probably pretty much exactly like Mechwarrior 4s and Battletechs, just that in Mechwarrior 3, perhaps in these specific story missions, they triggered a sound volume or something that gave the impression as though they are more than a name and a sound set. So in that regard, I think it's kind of the answer is both. I think we're like Mechwarrior 4 and Battletechs, but we're also very much like Mechwarrior 3s. And if you were at MechCon and played the MechCon mission, you would see specific comments about events, objectives, things like that. So I think we kind of have all of it similar to all three. Long question. Will the game make changes for following missions when players make wrongful decisions, like basically destroying too many civilian buildings and such? If it's part of the mission objectives. So I don't think this is some, dynamic aspect where it's like the mission objectives have nothing to do with any of that stuff. But if you happen to destroy too much civilian stuff, then it'll just decide that you failed regardless. I think we keep this about the mission objectives. And if the mission objectives, kind of like in the MechCon mission, is to save the farms or not let too many of them be destroyed, then you can fail if too many of them are destroyed. That does include your damage as well. Like in that mission in particular, you stop them from destroying too many. But if you're nonchalant and end up walking through the last farm on your way through, and you'd fail the objective because you destroyed it. It got destroyed. So I think it's all about the mission objectives specifically, rather than just sort of some overarching behavior tree. I think we answered this KNA 5041 about working together and focused flank. It's all about the aggro system and the player's command. And yeah, I think we answered that.
So in terms of retaliation AI, that is, if you're firing on your lance mates and they get pissed off and start shooting back at you, That's something where you're going to have to just try it and find out, see what happens.
So you talked about a little about this earlier, about visual sensor differences with maybe biomes and weather, and how that kind of relates to, the implementation of ECM that's going in and stuff like that. I guess we can cover that a little bit. Do you want to go over that one a little
sure,
bit again?
sure.
Okay.
Sorry. So the AI itself basically scales on a few of those factors we've mentioned before. So which question are we on right now?
I was looking at composite armor.
Okay.
Did I
I'm
skip
sorry.
one?
I was looking at the wrong one. How does it handle the visual sensor differences? Okay. So a lot of our sensors in the game essentially come down to a sight cone. But this sight cone can be affected by a host of factors. It can be affected by the weather. It can potentially be affected by ECM. The AI has an awareness state internally of, do I think that there's anything there at all? Is there, can I tell what that thing is? Do I know if it's friendly or hostile? Theoretically, there could be stealthy moments with light mechs, but it's definitely something where that is not the main focus. And the AI itself, the AI will never do really stealthy things unless you try to command your lancemates to do that. In terms of what the player is able to do, setting up ambushes, for instance, I'm not going to say it's impossible, but I'm going to say it's going to be relatively hard, just due to being able to see something giant on the horizon.
Let's move. I mean, as the Nat's just in there, I'm just gonna say that's based on the skill settings that are given to a particular unit when you bump into them, and I suppose there is some possibilities for us to give different factions or areas of the inner sphere different sets of starting skill conditions that would give them a little different feel. It's a good idea. I'm not sure it's something that we've locked in to do at this point. I think it's been more about just as you get more reputation, more elite, and then they get higher skills. But I'm not sure if that system would be flexible enough to say provide two equally competitive or smart systems, but have them behave differently. So it's an interesting question, though. But I think that's all I can say on that for now.
Automatic experience gain. So, in terms of how the automatic experience gain happens, it's not something where, as far as I know, it's directly tied to kills or the kill shot. Every time if you've played the game FTL, it's more like that. Like anytime you do something, you're getting more experience with it. So every time you're firing a weapon and you hit the enemy, you're going to get a bit of experience for that skill with that weapon, or just with your gunnery skill in general. Every time you dodge a shot, you're going to get a little bit of evasion skill. So it's not something where you would have to micromanage. This unit or this pilot must get the last hit on 10 enemies before he levels up. That's something. I mean, if you want to, as a player, sit there and let your allies, farm damage on something for half an hour, like, go for it, right? But you don't have to do that at all. Just normal gameplay will bring them up at a reasonable pace.
Is vehicle infantry VTOL AI more simple than mech AI? And if so, is it possible to transpose the mech AI into vehicles to make them more potent? I think it is more simple, but I don't really think it's like a beneficial thing to just think, well, take the time to put the mech AI on them so they're better. I don't know, thoughts on that?
It absolutely is simpler compared to mech AI. It's also not something that makes a lot of sense to transpose onto most of the vehicles, just due to how they move, how durable they are, and the relative lack of weapons that they have. Most of these enemies have one or two kinds of weapons on them. Some have a few more, but they're very limited in what they're actually able to do. And they're not designed to be you know, this is the most interesting part of the game. They're there to add flavor to it. They're there to make the engagement more interesting. They're there to make you have to focus on them in terms of, if there are 10 enemy tanks and a few helicopters and 2 mechs, the mechs are going to be the most interesting one-on-one fight. But if you completely ignore all of the tanks and the helicopters and everything else that's around you, they're going to do a lot of damage to you over time, and you have to respect that.
Yeah, I think that the message here is that I don't think that they'll be in a situation where you're finding the vehicle AI lacking. Like, there's probably still some things we can do to make them a little better as we, close out the game and continue to finalize the game. But I think it'll be, an appropriate amount of AI intelligence for, the vehicles. Yeah, someone, I think Tina just marked it off. There was one we'd skip, but I thought we'd answered it already. Around the answer is yes to them being different skill levels for pilots or for pirates or who you're fighting on. So yes, we answered that one. Can AI utilize jump jets for navigation yet? I'm going to answer this, then let Anders answer it properly. I've talked to Neiman about this and talked to these guys a bit about it. They do use jump jets. I think we do hope that we're going to be able to put more in. It's more of a challenge for us to go really far with, say, having them jump up on top of buildings and things that use it as sniping positions and stuff, because those sort of decision-making processes are very complex and probably requires even like hand placement of nav meshes on top of the buildings, or even like jump nodes on top of the buildings, and all things that are possible, but it's a little more complex, and we're not sure how far we can go down that road for initial release. But certainly I think it's easier to go further with jump jets when it comes to fighting and brawling behavior. So, the way a player uses them to spin and turn on a enemy much quicker and faster, or to jump over top of an enemy and use them in general open brawling situations. I do think there's more improvement we can do in that regard. Does that seem fair, Anders?
Yes, I think you covered pretty much everything there. Just to add on to it, our goal with jump jets is to make it so that if the AI is using them, they're using them in a good, intelligent fashion. Throughout our testing, there have been a lot of times where there have been a few moments where the AI uses the jump jets and it looks really, really cool, and they almost land on you, and it's terrifying, and it's this really like, oh, this is awesome moment. But then they'll turn around and they'll just jump randomly in the middle of a firefight, or try to get near a building and jump onto it, jump off, and it's like, well, why are they doing this, right? So we are trying to find a way where they don't do the really dumb stuff with the jump jets, because as soon as that happens, no one's having a good time anymore.
Yeah, that's a good answer there. I'm gonna really quickly tip this Galarg one, this Shadow of Mordor thing. Yeah, we actually have one designer in the office who's talked about this right from the get-go. It's a cool concept, but our we're basically mission based, and you're failing or succeeding. There's very little opportunity for this beyond the story missions. So certainly you could increase the skill set of an enemy in further encounters and make this happen. It's just I don't know if it makes sense for the missions. It'd probably be less about a particular enemy and more about a particular faction you're fighting against as reputation level increases. But I think that's all I can say about that for now. I understand the question, I believe, and it probably pertains more to our story missions though than say like the generated missions. Will there be Easter egg responses? I don't even know how to answer that one.
That's going to be something more up to designers, I think. Crafting the feel, like it's more of a scripted response to an event in gameplay than specifically an AI thing directly. It could absolutely happen, but it's also something where it's really non-essential. So it would be something where we'd add it in if we had the time towards the end of the project.
Is there pilot attributes shown on pilot profiles hiring hall that will define AI behavior or influence it? I would say yes. That's where you see all their skill settings and such as you're hiring. How granular is decision making of the AI, more specifically in combat? That's a really broad question that we've probably answered in various questions. I don't know if there's anything you want to add to that one, Anders.
I think we've covered most of how the AI makes its decisions and the factors involved in it. If there's anything specific you'd like to know, you could ask again in the later AMA, and we might be able to get to it.
If the player damages a specific component too often during missions with the enemy, I try to reinforce that component and max over the course of the campaign. I don't think so. That's no, I don't think it's going to be remembering that you love blowing off right arms. Therefore, do something about that in future missions. I'm not sure. Coffee giraffe here. Does your lance mate's personality affect how they behave? Do they have one or every pilot sheet of skills and profile pictures? What I'm asking, personality quirks. It's much more along the lines of skills and profile pictures, and a particular voice, and they behave in that way, and you give them commands. No, it's not going to go to some level where there's a guy who's like a known coward or something like that. I mean, at least certainly not. It's not in our initial plans. I know it sounds pretty cool. You could think of some really cool things, but if we had another year, maybe.
New target acquired.
You bring vehicles. I think the answer we've given this a few times is you're probably not going to bring them. Like, they're not going to come right out of the dropship with you. But there's going to be plenty of cases, probably certainly in story missions and in others, where you get to control vehicles, or they'll be a part of your friendly group. You saw that in the MechCon mission, where you had a set of turrets and friendly vehicles that were a part of your team. I don't think we're going to get to the point where you're giving them commands. We haven't totally ruled it out yet, but your commands are for your lance mates, and they'll be friendly AI in the vicinity helping. That's generally how we're probably approaching that. Again, another one on difficulty. The game knows. How does the game know when to scale up, down on difficulty? It's simply, this is about your reputation level in the missions you take. It's that simple. It's like if you're a super elite mercenary unit and you take the super elite mission, it's super elite difficulty level, and there's nothing about your sucking in that mission that's gonna like make them play easier. You took the mission, your reputation level said you were ready for it, and if you get your ass handed to you, you're gonna lose your ass on the contract. What about bosses in the game? Yeah, there is. This is primarily reserved for the story mission, so at this point, it's certainly possible for our generation system to do stuff like this, but I guess I would view that as a little more of a stretch goal. But hopefully, if Mechwarrior 5 is successful, there'll be plenty of hopefully patches and DLCs and expansion packs and improvements to the generation system. I'm not ruling it out for the initial game, but primarily I would say at the very least this is kind of reserved for the story missions, not the generation system. But the answer is yes, there'll be bosses in the game.
Can we use those tactics, such as a unit calling for help, to draw the enemy into your own ambush, or use it as a ruse? I'm sure you can find a way to do both of those things. The game, in terms of how you engage with it, is relatively open-ended, and the systems are designed to be something where the player can understand what's going on. And if you can find a way to exploit that to make the encounter, and set up an ambush, or whatever, draw enemies out of the battle so that they're off chasing a light mech of yours while the rest of your lance goes in and has an easier time with the objective. If you can make that happen, that's awesome, and it should be possible to have it occur.
So we started a couple minutes late, and we're a couple minutes over, so I think we're just going to take like one or two more. Will this AI work carry over into MWO? No. I would suggest that ship has sailed. Never say never, but almost never. I think you'd be looking at future sequels to Mechwarrior Online for that stuff now. It's just going back to that CryEngine 3 level of technology and trying to create an AI system like we've done here. It would be colossal and just well beyond the scope for the age of the product and the technology. I want to answer this escort mission. Will the escorts react? Blah blah blah. So the point is, there's a good chance you may not even see an escort mission in Mechwarrior 5, and I think it's fair to say that we're scared because escort missions generally suck, and not just escort mode in Mechwarrior 9, but most games. Honestly, even the only ones I was frustrated with in BattleTech were the escort ones. So I don't know. We're just saying, why blow our brains out? Why spend time and resources on it if we have better ideas and better mission ideas? So we're focusing on what we feel are better mission types. I don't know if we'll find time to make escort missions, and I don't think anyone's going to lose sleep over it. Can AI adapt to targets in cover? We answered this a few times. Yes, they can. They will know you're in cover. If it's indestructible, they'll have to path around to you. If it's destructible stuff, they may decide to blow that cover out from next to you. No aero tech in the Mech 5. This is an interesting one. Will the AI ace pilots have more dangerous mech loadouts? I think the answer is yes. Like we've talked about it before, we can do this, and I think we certainly will be doing it in the story missions and the named pilots and like the boss pilots. And I think it's quite obvious that in the very late stages of elite reputation levels that there's going to be more and more of the quote unquote like quirked up weapons and like advanced manufacturers and just better equipment showing up in the battlefield, and it's going to show up in the battlefield in the form of the mechs and therefore show up in your salvage more frequently. So yeah, I think the loadouts will become more dangerous as you move along through reputation as well. Let's end on this one. What's been the biggest challenge you faced in building your...
Oh, the biggest challenge in building the AI. That's a really tricky one. There have been a ton of challenges over the course of development.
Yeah, pick one and tell them about it today.
Yeah. Probably the biggest has been making it so that the mechs behave consistently and in a manner where it's believable, based on their weight class, based on their weapon loadout, all of this sort of stuff. We've had issues with the pathfinding where they'll get stuck randomly in little corners, or they'll hit their head on something and not know how to, go around or go under at a slightly higher point. In combat, they have, only focused one guy, or they've refused to focus one guy. Getting it and tuning it and tweaking it over and over and over and over and over, until we've got something now where the AI behaves mostly pretty well. I mean, we're still tweaking it here and there, right, when we find corner cases, but just getting it so that they behave differently, so that they behave interestingly, so that you can look at them and say, yeah, that's actually what I expect from an Atlas, or from a Raven, or from a Catapult, or a Hunchback, or whatever mech you come across. That's been the biggest thing throughout the entirety of this project.
That's awesome. Thanks, Anders. I think Anders did a great job. What do you guys think? Thanks for your time, Anders, and thanks for everybody for showing up and asking your questions. And there's a lot of great questions there. I thought this was one of our better AMAs because I don't know, it's just maybe because it was fresh and different things that we were talking about. Yeah, well, so we'll see you guys, some of you guys, back at 6, and we'll be ready to answer these same questions probably again, and maybe a few new ones.
Thank you all.
See you at 6 p.m. if some of you will be joining us.
Bye, guys.
Later.
Target destroyed.